Well, we're at our general meeting for Calaveras Master Gardeners, and we have Maggie Murphy, our wonderful Calaveras Master Gardener, that is going to give a presentation on garden journals. Maggie, take it away.
Okay, well, this presentation is on garden journals, as Debbie already mentioned, and we'll pop right into slide 2. And throughout the presentation, know that I will show pictures of things from different companies because it's easiest to show it that way and have a visual. But for all of us with our Master Gardener hat on, we do not ever endorse any specific company. You can do whatever you want in your personal space, but in the context of Master Gardeners, we don't endorse a company. And although I'll show you pictures, it's more just that I was able to grab a visual reference from these companies than it is any kind of endorsement of that specific group. Okay, let's go to slide 3. When we talk about garden journals, there are different ways to keep records for yourself. Some people love working with paper and making notes, and other people keep their entire life on their computer or phone. And you can do garden journals in both places. Once you get into paper, there are all kinds of artsy ways, beautiful books that people keep, and also once you get into paper, there are the steno pads and the absolutely no frills. I just want to make some notes and nothing more. And when you consider what to do for yourself for a garden journal, the things you need to think about is what style is pleasing to you and how much time do you want to spend doing it. Some people make notes every single day. Other people prefer to just make notes at the end of the season about things they might want to change the next year. And finally, what is the right data for you? You'll find if you ever look through all the garden journals and choices out there that there's all kinds of data you can keep track of. At the same time, is it data you would use? When I looked at garden journals online to see all the different choices to cover in this presentation, I found that a lot of them are simply plant trackers. You know, this is your plant name, sun, shade, water, some notes. And for me personally, I grow so many plants that I'd rather just have my Sunset Western Garden book or Google if I need it. I'm not going to keep details on every single plant I grow. And also, having a mature garden, I know some of the plants without having to write it down. So when you think about what to keep, is it worth your time to record something? And just because the person next to you might need or want that information, it doesn't mean that you do. What's good for one person and what they really want to know about their garden can be very different than what's useful to somebody else. Okay, let's go to slide 4. And here are a few different options that you could see. You can go to Etsy and you can get a leather journal for $75, and that particular journal is one that is the same page throughout. You can also see they have the spiral bound on the lower left. That one is one that is simply a plant tracker. It's all the same, it's plants. If you prefer to keep your own notes, for years, I did the steno pads on the lower right. You can get them for less than $3 each, and I would keep notes and just write it away. But the problem you get with paper notebooks, which I know a lot of us do still use, is when you want information, how do you find it? You know, if you've got 2 years worth of steno pads for notes and you think you wrote down something about something, do you know which month or which year or which notebook, or do you have to flip through all kinds of notebooks to find that information? So for me, and I'll admit I've been in computing since I was in my 20s, and that's a very long time ago, I keep my own notes on the computer because I can simply search and find whatever it is I'm looking for much easier with an online reference. Let's go to slide 5. Once you get into journaling, there's all kinds of ways to do DIY journals, and I'm showing you one notebook there that has some wrapping paper decoupaged on it that a friend made for me. People who like to make sketches, maybe even just blocks of color on a garden, love to put their garden journals into drawing pads of paper, the spiral bind drawing pads. And if you have a little bit of glue and paper, you can make a beautiful journal that is perhaps a little bit more fun to work in. And the other thing that I'd like to mention, since I know we do have some DIYers in the crowd, is that although I showed you the leather one from Etsy, when you do go shopping for journals, or if you do, you'll find that there's something that people call vegan leather. Well, vegan leather is vinyl. So if you go to the fabric store, Walmart or Joann, and you look at their vinyl that looks like leather, that is what vegan leather is. It's the new fancy term to make something sound wonderful. Okay, let's go to the next one. Slide 6. This one might be a little hard to see all the detail, but what you have on the left is a search on Etsy on printable garden pages. Now what this is people actually buy a file, you download it to your computer, and you print it on your own home printer, or you can take it to any kind of a shop that does printing or lets you print and print it there. And the neat thing about print your own pages is if you have a couple of plants you want to track, but not all of them, maybe you just want 6 pages of plant tracker, but you want 300 pages of daily observations, and you can print how many of what page you want, so you can customize your book. This is still a paper book once you end up with it, to be exactly what you want and exactly what works for you. And the prices are all across the board on these. What I did find is pretty much anything that's more than 20 pages of choices. Do you want to keep weather? Do you want to keep this? Do you want to keep that? Those tend to run at $8 to $15. And the ones that are not very expensive at all are often only 1 or 2 pages. And what you see on the right is one of the pictures from Staples that you can print you can buy any kind of fancy paper and they'll print it for you in different sizes and different types of bindings. Now if we go to slide 7, and this one's from Office Depot, and it's just showing you the different kinds of bindings you can get. If you do your own pages and you want a letter size booklet, you can go from tape bound, and you could even do different sections for different tape bound on the right, or the different kind of spiral bound wire and comb bindings, and you can put a little, they make those clear vinyl covers on top. So there are lots of different ways to put together the package. Slide 8. Some people love working at their desk, sit down with a cup of tea and make notes. And if you prefer file folders, you can get the kind where you have a 2-hole punch, make holes at the top, and have your pages and have different colors of file folders and such, and keep your notes that way. Let's go to slide 9. And here we are. This is kind of the meat of it. What are the considerations for your own garden journal or garden tracking, whichever way you prefer to think about it? And if your garden is very large, you might not want a lot of detail about every single item in your garden. Whereas if you just have a few small beds, maybe you do want to keep all that detail. And do you start a lot of plants from cuttings or seed? I do a lot of seed starting of plants, and my tracking reflects that. What day did I plant? What day did it germinate? All different kinds of when's the best season. Did plants or seeds from this person from the swap germinate or not? So that's where a lot of my effort is. The next one, do you like to sketch? And some people like to write. They want to practice their writing every day. So is your book geared towards you having a little crock full of colored pencils next to you and making pictures of the flowers or the bees? Or is your book geared to you making notes and trying to expand on your ability to describe something, or have a journal that's personal, but it's geared towards a garden more than a general diary kind of thing? And then, of course, you can do all of those on paper or computer, although the drawing, of course, you'd have to be a computer graphic artist to do. But what is easiest for you and what is most comfortable for you. Again, it doesn't matter what's most comfortable or worthwhile to the person next to you. Garden journals should be very specific to you, and they should work for you. They're not really for anybody else. And again, the major consideration is how much time and effort do you want to keep? You know, people can trip themselves up by just trying to keep track of too much stuff up front and make it become a chore rather than something that's interesting and fun.
Hey, Maggie, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what did your garden journals, because I know you said that you've been doing this for a while and you started with the paper, were they, how have they changed through the years? Have you, did you start off with maybe one system and then evolve to a different system?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You know, it's like we're talking years here. So there were times that, you know, I've done a lot of business writing, and in business writing, the fewer words you use, the better. You know, 3 bullet points in an email, how much, if you're sending something out to a large group, how much can they handle? And it's very few words. So for a while, I was writing in the garden journal as a way to train myself not to drop all the adjectives out of my life.
Oh.
But to be able to add words and descriptors. So I was making notes about the garden and how it appealed to me and such. And before I moved up here, I started many more things from cuttings, because truthfully, in Pleasant Hill, I could take cuttings of my fig tree, stick it in my raised garden bed in November, and in spring I had rooted fig cuttings. Everything there was so easy that I only did cuttings. Whereas since I've moved here, I do get on my hillside at an elevation, so I do get some snow in the winter and some really hard frost. And I've moved to doing more on heat mats under lights in the garage. So now I'm more interested in keeping detail about my seed starting. And also, my hands don't love writing as much. I actually prefer to write on the computer to have everything perfectly legible at a later point in time.
I understand.
It has evolved, and there was a while that I was practicing my drawing, and I did have a crock of colored pencils right by the notebooks, but that it can be time consuming. And if you really want to practice your drawing, then by all means add drawing to your garden journal, but it becomes a space where you're spending time drawing. So it's one of those, how much time do you have in your life and how much of it do you want to spend? And I do have a lot of friends that love to practice their writing or practice their drawing, and garden journaling is one of the many ways you can do that.
Yeah, good
Maggie?
ideas.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Are these journals going to be printed and available, or online and you print them?
When we get to the second part of the presentation, we'll go over that. We're looking at doing a fundraiser with a PDF where you could get the file, but we did a preview of this presentation to the information session last week, and people did ask if it would be possible to order printed pages, and Debbie and I have discussed how that might happen. So we're looking at offering both, although the printed pages offering would probably only come up once a year. Like we would tackle who wants what and how many pages and get it done and distributed, and then not do it again until, you know, the next summer or something.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Deb, let's hit slide 10.
All right.
So what do you keep track of? You know, Deb had mentioned to me, I think it's Bev that keeps track of the weather every day. Whereas for me, my notes about the weather, I just want to know the outliers. I want to know when the last few hard frosts were, the first few hard frosts. Pretty much I remember if we had rain in a year or not, but I might make a notation if we had a bad drought. You know, most of us are getting used to being concerned about drought through February, and then in March getting some water. So it depends on what, again, you want to know. I prefer on as far as daily, weekly, monthly, or seasonal. I like to make seasonal notes because I can look and say, okay, you know, there was spring in the bulbs, and out of the whole garden, what worked and what didn't work, and what would I want to change for the next season. Whereas for me, daily notes started to get lost. It was just too much. Again, other people love it, to sit down with their cup of coffee in the morning and make some notes about their garden. So it's completely how much time you have and what you enjoy doing. Things I haven't covered yet. Some people use it like a planner. Debbie and I were laughing about the Franklin planners and all the goal setting planners people had, you know, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People with their 5-year goals and their 1-year goals to get to the 5-year goals, and then their quarterly goals to get to the year goal, and monthly goals to get to the quarterly goals. And although that's a lot, you can do it with your garden. You know, actually putting this together, I thought I really want to do a better job about setting some goals. I have some high level ones that I'm changing out a lot of the taller plants and switching to dwarf plants, simply because I am in an area surrounded by forest, kind of like Frank, I know you are, and I want as little fuel as possible. So I don't really want tall plants because that's more fuel. I want the little 4 to 8 inch high plants because that's less fuel for fires. So I do have some goals, but I was thinking I could actually map them down better about changes I want to make to my garden and my goal sheets. Some people are adamant about keeping track of expenses. I used to not keep track of any. I suppose in some ways I didn't want to know. But then at one point I realized I was spending quite a bit of money and feeding the gophers and the wolves, and maybe I should keep track of it and keep myself in line more. So I do keep some expenses, but not all. I keep all my online orders in my spreadsheet. If I pick up something at the local store, I usually don't bother to put that in there. Another area on the right side, you'll see pests and problems, and that's something I hadn't kept in the past, and I've seen it on some other journals, and I thought, what a great idea. I mean, if I know that aphids usually pop up in the middle of this month, and I can know to start maybe putting some soap spray out 2 weeks before that if it's a plant that always gets aphids. And especially with thrips and things that fly after they've been around for a little bit, if you can get them while they're still crawlers, you can get rid of them with soap. So I do think keeping track of the pests and problems and when they happen is a fantastic idea. Again, people keep track of all different kinds of things and goals. Okay, slide 11.
Okay.
Now, some of you might have seen this. Dolores, as part of the class last season, asked everybody who was propagating, she gave them a worksheet and said, keep track of these notes. And for people learning how to propagate, did they use rooting hormone? Were the cuttings inside or outside? How many hours of light? What kind of soil or medium? And these are great. Now, you can see in that block on the right, a lot of us, if we've been starting plants for a while, we wouldn't need all that because we do it a certain way all the time. I like a mix of mostly soil and perlite. I know Dolores prefers all perlite. I like some soil in my mix, and I already know I use the heat mat in winter and that kind of thing. So I don't keep track of the parts of this that I wouldn't do unless I'm trying something new. You know, years ago, Sacramento Rose Garden and San Jose Rose Garden had started putting out on their websites how they were doing the Ziploc baggie method. You know, you put your soil and your perlite in your little gallon Ziploc bag and put in your cuttings with a little opening and start them that way. And it was in vogue for a bit to start plants that way, and everybody thought it was cool. And if I did that, then it would be useful to have notes. As a side note, mine always rotted. I did not like the bag method. Some people still do it. It didn't work for me. So if you try something new, keeping notes on whatever you're doing that's new is really something you'll be happy to be able to look back on. And we can go to slide 12. And these were some of the people who sent in back up to Debbie and Dolores what they were doing. And you can see that it's very different depending on who it is, what they wanted to keep track of, and how they kept track of it. A couple by hand and a couple kept it on as a computer editable document. And it's completely different, and that works. These notes work for each person. And I know Debbie mentioned when we did this that Dolores said she learned a lot just by reading everybody else's notes about some of the minor changes they made and what they saw, because these weren't things that she had really started before. Okay, let's go to slide 13. What do I keep? Well, I'm a computer nerd. I mentioned that already. I've been on the computer for years and years and years and years. And now I'm smart enough to keep everything in the cloud. So if my computer crashes, I can get to my information from a phone or a pad or a library computer, whatever. My data is there. It's in the cloud, and it's something that I can search. And the first thing that I do have is a spreadsheet. I use Excel. I've used that in business for years. You can actually get a free spreadsheet by going to Google Drive and doing a Google spreadsheet, and they let you make spreadsheets on Google for free. And if you have an Apple computer, you also have a free program for spreadsheets there. And the other thing you'll see is I do map a few on that picture with the color blocks at the top, and I'll cover these in a little bit more depth, but this is just the high level. But I do like to map a new bed. Some of my existing beds where I know in my head everything that's there, I don't map them, but when I'm planning a new bed or my vegetable beds, I do like to map them out and see how my colors are spreading out and my spacing. For a calendar, I actually use my Google Calendar. It used to be, my work was always on a Microsoft Office calendar, and you used to be able to sync your Microsoft Office work calendar to Google. At a certain point, the company decided that was a security concern, and we stopped doing it. So I'm in the habit of always having my work calendar separate from my personal calendar, because that way, if my mind is going to think about work, I'm logged into work and I'm charging them. Otherwise, it's not on my personal calendar. So my personal calendar for Google, and I'll bring it up later, but I put something right there. I wouldn't want yet another calendar in a garden journal, because it's easier. If you keep one calendar on your fridge, just whatever you want to know, it's like, Costco has bulbs this month, or it's February, it's time to plant tomatoes from seed for the seed sale. I put all those notes as soon as I think of them in my calendar. I mean, my calendar for November does say, last year, these 3 different seed companies had free shipping on Black Friday. So I know to have seed orders ready to go in case they offer it this year, which in truth, it's possible they might not, because most of you know a lot of seed companies ran out of seed at the beginning of COVID because people were ordering so much food seed from that they had never been expecting. But I do find a calendar is necessary for me, and I like having it. You know, I can pull it up on my phone or my laptop or my pad. It's everywhere. And then the last one, I no longer keep drawings. I just snap photos all the time. And I know you can do this on your PC as well, but my Mac, my photos will come up by month and year. So I can go see what's blooming in which months. And if I want to change that, and if something doesn't look good, I actually don't. I share a lot on Victory Garden, and I'll share some stuff on my Facebook or other places, but I always share the pretty pictures. Whereas in my photo library, I have the ugly pictures. You know, the part of the bed you don't like, or this doesn't look quite right. And if you stand back and snap a photo, you can then look at it and go, okay, what do I want to change about this later? Can I live with it? It's kind of, probably all of you can commiserate with this, but my beds look fantastic in spring. You know, everything's flowering, it's beautiful, it's lush. And by this time of year, September, October, when we've had 100-degree weather and you're not watering as much, or maybe some of you are, but I'm not, because our area is on wells and we've had wells go dry. It looks like hell. And you go, do I just want to raise everything down, you know, which was, I still remember Sean Krylatek when he gave our Master Gardener class was like, you know, there's a reason that most natives don't bloom in August and September. It's like normally plants in this area of California go to sleep in August or September, and we're kind of working against nature, trying to get a lot of blooms or lush look at this time of year. So I do use my photos, and I love that I can sort them by month and year and just go back after the minor effort of walking around with my phone in my hand in the garden. Slide 14, and here we're getting into the meat of it. Now, it's okay if you can't read every word. You don't have to memorize a spreadsheet, but you know,
that's a relief.
Yep. When you said, what have I done and what have I not done, you know, where you see plant, that column on the far left, I used to keep both the common name and the scientific name, and now I just put, you know, what I want. But if you do keep a spreadsheet, one of the things you will find, I would always copy and paste, you know, my online order into the spreadsheet, and the online order might say Orange Fantasia Chard. Well, that's all good and fine, but if you want to sort your column, you want it to start chard, because you want to see all your chards together, or all your squash together, or all your tomatoes together. So I always start with the word I'm going to search on, which is the plant. And that Debbie had asked what was red. This particular one is, depending on the sheet, some of them are things I'm going to plant this year, but these are things when I went through my vegetable seeds that I want to buy more seeds. So as soon as it's time for me to start buying seeds, I have my little notations about the things I think I need to buy for this season. And you'll see next to plant, I've got start date. I actually had deleted out, when you look at my previous years, it would have the actual day that I started on this day. And then you'll see there's a germinated date. I used to just keep yes or no, whether or not the plant germinated, but I find it really helps me to know, because something like eggplant takes a lot longer for me to have germinate than tomatoes. Before you give up on something, you want to know how long to wait. And if you keep your dates over time, you get a really good feel for each vegetable and how it works in your situation. You know, at one point we sent out to the other people who grew tomatoes for the Master Gardener sales and said, how do you guys approach this? You know, I have the heat mat and shop lights, and one of our folks starts her tomatoes for the sales on top of her refrigerator to get the warmth, and then puts a tray in front of her sliding glass patio doors for sunlight. So it completely depends on the different type of thing you do. You're going to have faster or slower germination as well. And as you see, I have a little, do I have it? Do I need to buy it? I have a height column, and that's partly because when I get over to the flowers, usually I recall what color it is. At one point I was keying in all the colors of all the flowers, and then it was like, I know what color I have. And if it's different, maybe you have a bunch of different colored snapdragons or columbines, I put it by the plant name now. I don't bother to try and write down color for everything. But because I'm moving towards dwarf plants and I'm getting new seed, I want to know the heights of the different ones that I'm getting. And then notes, you know, in different versions I've had source. In my notes now I put where the seed is from, and then the second notes are things, you know, some seed you need light to germinate, and that means you don't want to sprinkle dirt on top before you water it in because it needs light. It has to be very much on top of the soil, but you don't want to plant all your seed that way because it's actually easier to germinate if it can have dark and have some soil on top of it because it stays moist better.
Maggie?
So this is one, yeah.
I'm wondering, how often do you make entries or make changes or notes into your garden journal?
Well, it goes with different times of year. You know, what will happen is as soon as the seed companies start adding their free shipping dates, I'll recheck the ones I want to buy and do a lot of entry. And every time I place an order, I do entry. And then once I start plants, of course, anytime I start a plant, I try that day to write down the date, just to open it up and put the dates in. And then once I have plants going, I check at least every few days to see if they've germinated or not. And if they have, then I make a notation. And part of what I do to make it easy is sometimes I'll just walk around. If I have a bunch of trays in the back porch, say I do winter sowing and I might have a whole bunch of trays of seed back there, then I walk around with the phone and I make my notation verbally into my notes app. And then I can sit down with the computer later to capture it, so I don't have to bring a paper and pen with me as I'm making notes.
So you're using your phone, you're talking into your phone, and then when you get to your computer, then you're transferring that information?
Yeah.
Okay.
Into the spreadsheet.
Okay, good idea.
That's usually just for checking germination and also when I plant. You know, when you're planting, you've got dirt all over you. You're not going to go back and forth on your laptop if you want your laptop not to get dirt in the keyboards and such. So I might plant all afternoon and then, you know, in the phone, look at what I've planted and make down verbally, say the notes into the phone, and then sit down with the computer later and update it.
Maggie, if you told us why the red color is important, I'm sorry, but could you explain that
That's
again?
okay. That's okay. If you look over a little towards the right, you will see it says to buy as opposed to half.
Yes.
So those are the ones I think I need to buy. Now on this particular sheet, Bride is, it says I have it, but the thing is that you'll see the dates, it's a little bit older. And I know I really liked Bride eggplant. So I was like, maybe if I'm placing an order with somebody who has it, because not everybody has it, maybe I'll get fresh seed. But mostly for me on this vegetable list here, I changed the color to red when it was things I know I want to grow next season, and either the seed might be getting old or I know for sure I'm out of it.
Oh, okay.
And that's just for me. And then once I place my orders, I just change them back to black and not bold anymore.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Deb, next slide.
Okay.
So we're at 15. And this is, you know, as things change, this is the first year I separated the vegetables from the flowers. Before it was all one big list, which is why you'll still see I have a column that says vegetables, herbs, or flowers. But I decided to separate them because my vegetables are all grown in my 4x8 vegetable raised beds, whereas the flowers are all in the flowering beds. I don't have an edible garden where I'm putting food in with the flowers. I might have some purple mustard that go in the flowering beds, but you know, I don't really worry about that. It's still listed under my vegetables, and that helps me keep track because I do trade seed, and I might end up with like 30 different kinds of tomato seed, and I'm really only going to grow maybe 4 to 6 different kinds of tomatoes. So seeing them all on a spreadsheet helps me keep track of how much I have of something, but it's now a little bit more compact to separate out the two. And you can see the difference on the flowering sheet than the vegetable sheet. This is a different year, and you'll see the planting method. And now I have the 4-foot heat mats, and I can actually get 2 rounds on those. If I'm starting my eggplants and peppers in January, once something has started on a heat mat, it takes a little bit more heat for something to germinate. Then you can move it off. Even most of the growing instructions will say germinate at this temperature, grow on at that temperature, and it can be 10 degrees cooler. So they can come off the heat mat and go under lights, and then I can put something else on the heat mat to get that extra little oomph for germinating. And you'll see these are 2017. This is a piece of an old sheet and different kind of notes that I kept at the time. I do in my notes, I like to mark down if it's an All-American selection winner or that kind of thing. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, and I will say when we talk about this, the people in the presentation for the information session did ask if they could have a copy of the spreadsheet, and we did tell them we'd let them have a copy. I've been trying to fix it up a little bit so we could send it out. At this point, I can send out something in an Excel. It'll take me a little while to check and see what Google Drive does to it. I'm not sure how well it handles converting the spreadsheet, but keeping the fact that you can sort on it, which is something I like to be able to do because I can sort on, you know, the seed companies and see what I'm getting from who, because they don't all carry the same stuff. Okay, and the next one, where we are, this one, the red means these are the things I'm going to grow this year. I look through my garden and I'm always growing, although they're not red, I'm always growing some of the columbine. That's okay. You're in the right, yeah, okay. You're in the right place.
She's keeping our attention.
It helps. Some of the snapdragons, you know, the F1 is a little 6-inch guy, and I definitely want more of that. The Antiquity Lemon is an odd one. It's just a different color that a friend gave me. My columbine, some years the gophers involved leave them alone, and some years they don't. So I tend to start some new columbines every year. Last year they were the midget ones. This year I'm going to add some at a bed that's further from the house. But also when I said I'm moving towards dwarf plants, that's for summer flowering things, because if it flowers in March, April, May, I don't really care. It can be, I have hollyhocks that flower, and then I can just cut them down to a foot by July. So the spring flowering plants I let be larger. And you'll see I've highlighted if it needs light, and that means the seed needs light, not the growing on plant, but it has to be sprinkled on the top. Or if it needs chill, because I do a lot of something called winter sowing, and if it needs chill, you want to get that seed chilling come December so that it goes through a period of chill. You wouldn't want to wait and plant it in March or April when it's not going to get the chill that's required for it to break dormancy. At the same time, if it's something like a zinnia, you don't want to plant it in December because it will just rot. It doesn't need the wet and chill to germinate. If it's a summer flowering annual from where the origin is a warm climate, but where the seed origin is a cold climate, you're going to need some chill.
Hey, Maggie, I noticed, I had to put on my glasses to see it, but you've got, it shows at the tabs at the bottom that you have your flowers separated and from your veggies, that kind of thing. I'm looking at all this information. Are you able to eat out of your vegetable garden year round?
Good question.
Yes. Yes, I am. But in winter, I usually only keep one bed, and I keep it with greens. I like chards and kales, some pak choi, and sometimes my herbs live over. I've had parsley live over, but pretty much it's mostly leafy greens. I'm a bit of a starch fan. I love my pastas and such. And for me, if the rest of you don't do it, it's like I just grab some chard leaves and slice them up and throw them in the pasta water for the last 3 minutes of cooking. Or if it's kale, if it includes the stems, it might be longer, but I just slice my leaves into strips and throw them in my pasta water for less time than the pasta takes. And you still get your kind of one pot meal, but you've got a lot of vegetables. So I do eat out of the vegetable garden year round, but I don't grow as much in the winter as in the summer. And I certainly don't grow as much as some other people. When I look at how much people are starting, we've got the Victory Garden space, and you look at this, and some of these people, it's like it's one other, they've already mentioned they're a single person, and you think, what are you going to do with all this food? So
Right. Do you have extras?
I usually do, but because I'm traveling less, I'm planting less. I used to meet friends for lunch every week or so and bring them some chard and kale, and now I'm just letting them pick up their stuff at the market. We're not meeting for lunch these days, kind of thing. Or I used to bring my extra down to the senior center in Murphy's, and they're not having meetings there. So
it looks like though, if somebody was like maybe super ambitious by having this spreadsheet, you could map out practically your meals all through the year. It would be kind of interesting if you could do that.
You can. You could even download a sheet that shows you when your harvest is going to be. Those are already on some of the seed company websites or some of the even master gardener sites that, it's start here, grow here, harvest here. And you could do that if you only want it fresh. I have a freezer full, and actually I've been harvesting my winter squash that you just leave on the counter. And, I was thinking, gosh, I'm going to have squash every week at the way this is going.
Which is great.
Squash harvest. It is. Okay, we can go to the next one.
Okay.
Some of the other things that are considerations for keeping on the far right, what you see is my little, I'm getting old and sometimes I forget the name of things sheet. It says natives, but there were things that I just had trouble finding. The yerba buena, the yerba santa there is that shrub that makes purple flowers, but it gets black over the summer. It gets sooty looking and it spreads by roots, and it's a native. And I have it coming up everywhere, but I would forget the name. It's one of those, if somebody wanted it, wow. It keeps coming into the yard because it comes by roots, and I keep pulling it up, and somebody could certainly get some from me. And then also I always forget the name of the lupinus bicolor. That's a little 4-inch, maybe 5-inch native lupine, and I would Google on mini lupine and try to find it, and I could never remember that name. Then there's the Calaveras that usually looks like a little tulip-like flower, but there's a bell-shaped one, It's a little round white globe, and I could never remember the name of that. So this is some of the natives with links that I just wanted to keep track of. You know, there's one oak there that doesn't say what it is, and it's, even though I'm a master gardener, I never sit down and look closely. It's like, is that a blue oak or a white oak? You know, you look at the pictures, you look at the acorns, but you don't have acorns that year. So, and that's just to know what's on my property. Then in the center, you see a portion of some of my seed orders. I often find different seed companies to, you know, you get your catalogs coming and you see something you like. And I very rarely buy just one plant because of the whole gopher and vole things. I like to start a bunch, and if I love it, I can keep some in a pot and put some in the ground and see if they survive the critters or not. And so I'll see something, and then the first thing I'll do is Google if I can get the seed for it. And I find new seed companies that way. So that's my tracking, and some of the seed companies that you might not know, but a lot of seed companies, they need to make it worth their bother because they're selling things that are $2 or $3 a packet, and they have to pay, you know, American minimum wage and benefits. So they'll have an $8 shipping charge because they don't want you to get just one packet. And I can breeze down and see who has which shipping and what I've gotten from people in the past. And then when you go to the far left, that's just, you'll see the calendar months across the top. It's, and it's also, that's an older sheet that I didn't make current. In addition to the photos, when I am thinking about new plants or trying to redo a bed, I look at when do I have blooms, you know, and do I have consistent blooms, and when do they start? You know, if I start having bees show up in March, do I have flowers in March, kind of thing. Okay, slide 18. And this is still in the Excel, and you can make blocks, and then you can shade your blocks. And, you know, the 3 orange blocks I only added this year because I do have gophers and voles everywhere. And we were talking about daylilies, and they said, oh, the tall orange ones, you just can't kill them. And I thought, oh, I should put them in the beds that the gophers like that and see if they survive. So I moved some over there, and you'll see this is a front of my house, and it says panel, and that's because those are the 8-foot fence panels. And I wanted that wide open space. It's sort of more shred and a plant here and a plant there. In truth, 8 foot deep is not deep enough. It still looks like a row of plants. You really need something wider if that was the look you're going for. But it lets me show the colors, and I was trying to vary if it was yellow daffodils or the white daffodils or yellow daffodils, and I was alternating them in front of each panel. And this let me map out the colors, and when I had something new I wanted to try, I could put it in there and see how it would look. Okay, and then slide 19. And again, this is sort of my computer nerd history. I tend to work in PowerPoint a lot. And one of the times I was mapping out the veggie beds, I just stuck it in PowerPoint. It probably should be in my Excel with everything else, but I was in the mood to do something else. And I do like to keep, you know, we all have those little plant tags, but halfway through the season, your vegetables are so big, the plant tags are buried. And if they're buried under squash, you're going to kind of get scratchy little marks all over your arm trying to dig them out. And I have found I've actually, I grow some things that look like each other. There's neck pumpkin, Tahitian butternut squash, and tromboncino that are all in the same squash family, and they look very similar. And I've actually harvested things and then had to come in here and look at my little bed to say, which one was that? You know, is that bed 2 or bed 3? And also it helps me keep track of just rotating the beds. If I try and put all the eggplants and tomatoes in one bed and all the squash in a different bed, then I can bring them up and down and rotate them around. So I like to play with that and keep this kind of diagram for the bed. Slide 20. And this again is the photos. If you just snap photos of everything, you can go back and see how it looks and is it something you like or you don't like. Of course, I'm showing you the photos from a period of time when I took photos of everything that looked pretty. This slide is not the ones that it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do there? And you'll see for me, you know, right at the top, this is from June through July is when some of these pictures were taken when I scrolled that bit. And then finally, next slide, the calendar and the blue boxes show, it might say plant snapdragons, plant basil, plant 6 weeks or 8 weeks before last frost. And there's actually a list in there. You know, plant scabiosa over on the Saturday. And then for those of you with good eyes, you'll spot a miracle grow on a Wednesday. And although I know some of you might have just shuddered that I said that word, people call miracle grow crack for plants. If you do grow seed over the winter and you have to be careful of damping off, you need to use a sterile seed sorting mix. And because it's sterile, there are no nutrients for your plant. So as soon as it gets its first true leaves, you know, the first 2 leaves that come out are the ones that are in the seed itself, the cotyledon. And then when it gets its first true leaves of what the leaf of that plant will look like, you have to start fertilizing with something. And it can be quarter or half strength fertilizer, but you need to give something. So I do have that in my calendar because there have been years where I've forgotten. And the next thing you know, your seedlings are starting to look yellow. If you don't let it go too bad, they'll recover if you pick it up. But it is something I like to put in the calendar. Slide 22. Okay, so this is my monologue about everything you can possibly choose to keep on a garden journal, and hopefully it gives you some ideas, and maybe you've made some notes as we've gone along about the kinds of things that are important for you to know later, not just in the moment, or if you're the kind of person that enjoys a little bit of self-care and self-nurturing and you want to get into writing more or drawing more, it can also be that. You know, you can choose, do you like having, if you're not comfortable on the computer, just because I use one, I would say don't put your garden journal on a computer. If you're comfortable with paper for notes, that would be the method to go. And do you want something very pretty or do you want something absolutely no frills and inexpensive? How much time? That's a big thing. And what kind of data is most useful to you? Do we have any questions on this portion of the presentation?
Hey, Maggie, I was just kind of thinking when you were talking about time, because there is so much information, which is great. Information is great. But I think maybe a worry could be that maybe it does take up too much time. Would the computer be faster to use to enter data, or would scribbling something on a piece of paper be faster?
That probably depends on the person. You know, my niece can type, gosh, she doesn't look at the computer, and, you know, it's a whirlwind fast. So some people are very slow on data entry, and actually if I had to write things down, my handwriting is now slower. So for me personally, keeping the same information on paper or a computer, it will be faster on the computer.
For you, it'd be faster, right?
On the computer, whereas for somebody else, it might be much faster on paper.
Right.
And also with, you know, when we offered to send people the spreadsheet, we were saying, do they want them empty or do they want the plant names of what I already had in there as a starting point? And the people on the other one wanted one with the plant names. So I've gone through my previous year's spreadsheet and things I've traded. So I'm adding plant names, and when I send it out to them, I'll let them know that I haven't started all of that. Sometimes when you trade seed, people send you extra packets going, oh, you'll probably love this. And you look at it and go, it can't take drought and full sun, so this is really not for me. So I have names of things that I don't personally serve because of my location where, you know, I'm full sun all the way around. I don't have shade, other gardens do. And it's also pretty dry up here.
Right.
But
I think
yeah, so,
I think one of the things
ahead.
that's impressed me with being organized and keeping track of data, which isn't kind of my natural inclination, but what it is reinforcing to me, the idea that if you do keep track of things, it can prevent future failures. So your success rate is going to go up.
Yes, yes. I might forget which, you know, did I lose a plant because I went somewhere and it needed more water, or did I lose a plant because the gopher or vole got it? And even then, part of me now is trying to make down, did the plant have roots or not? Because those of you with gophers and voles know sometimes they don't eat your plant, but it might die if they burrowed around your plant and it got air around the roots. It's kind of like, you know, a kid taking bites and different pieces of chocolate and putting it back in the box. They don't always kill the plant, but they ruin it. So yeah, now I try to check and see if it has roots, because there are some things that they don't eat. And that's, you know, as I mentioned, that's what I'm moving towards, is trying to plant the things that they're less apt to munch the roots. And as far as if they're burrowing around the roots, that's, you know, that's just going to happen.
Right.
So I need to mark down how plants are dying, because a few years later you might only recall that you grew it, but it died, but you don't really know. Maybe it was something you could grow again if you had a note about it.
Well, I think obviously, Maggie, you enjoy doing a lot of that journaling as well, because it has such detail in it that you have to enjoy it as well. And that was pretty remarkable.
Thank you. But in part, it's been years. You know, if you have some and you just start off and then you add a little more and then you add a little more, then it's never one big effort all at once, which could be daunting. So now that I have it set up, it's really easy to just, you know, with the morning coffee or something, just add a few lines to a spreadsheet. And it isn't something I even enter to every day for the most part.
Well, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, because it gives you so many ideas to take from that.
Super. Thank you. Now, Debbie, we were going to stop recording this one and then start a new one.
Right. So does anybody have any other questions for Maggie? Otherwise, we'll stop and we'll move on to the next thing.
I just pulled out an old book, an old journal. I think maybe somebody even gave it to me. But what's interesting is if you're interested in getting someone that's kind of the more casual gardener, this one happens to say Western Gardening Journal. So if you go on to Etsy, you get the whole national spread, or Lee Valley or something like that. But they do have them, I think, where it's more regional, because this is not blank. It has suggestions and that type of thing in it, and some blank space. But anyway, regional stuff.
Good idea. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending this presentation. Thank you, Maggie. This has been wonderful. This really is. So just to let everybody know, if my little cursor will come up here. Whoops. I'm going to, okay, here we go. I'm going to stop recording.